Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child using the method of catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I am your host, Carrie Mecki Lozano. Everyone, I am so excited because starting in our next podcast episode in 2 weeks, we are going to be doing a book study on the Good Shepherd and the Child, A Joyful Journey. This is a really beautiful book. It's so easy to read. It's a wonderful beginner book if you haven't read any of Catechesis of the Good Shepherd books yet. It's also a really great refresher for anybody who has done formation before. So we're going to be doing 4 consecutive episodes on the first 4 chapters of The Good Shepherd and the Child. So order your book now so that you have it and are ready to go for in 2 weeks. You can read the chapter before the episode or after the episode or during the episode, whatever you want to do. Get your friends together and talk about the book. Get on Zoom calls together. We're going to have some discussion questions and some points to ponder on our webpage. So look on our webpage, cgsusa.org, click the button where it says learn, and then down where it says book study, and you'll be able to find lots of information to help you get together with your friends to dive into this book more, or just even to do it by yourself. We're also going to be posting some of those questions on our Facebook page so that we can have some online discussion there that go with each of the chapters of the book. I'm so excited to do this journey with you guys. I'm so excited to grow together as community through this really beautiful book. So go in our show notes. I will have a link there so that you can order the book, The Good Shepherd and the Child, A Joyful Journey, so that you can join us on this beautiful journey. Today, I have a really great episode for you. I interviewed Pam Moore, who is the author of the book, Taste and See, Savoring the Child's Wisdom. This is a really beautiful book that we offer with Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for anybody who wants to do what it says and savor the child's wisdom in these small doses. It's one of those books that you want to just put on your nightstand and read the very short chapters before you go to bed, maybe, or whenever you have time, just so that you can sit there and ponder. It is a really beautiful book to help us understand the beauty and depth that the child's wisdom has for us as a gift for us. I just recently found out about this book, and it is definitely a hidden treasure for anybody who has children in their lives. So I invite you all to listen to this episode and to Pam Moore's wisdom. And if you're interested in ordering her book, I will also put a link to that in our show notes as well. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Welcome, Pam, to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. We are very excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
Pam, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was thinking about this and remembering that I didn't get to go to college right after high school like a lot of folks. I didn't go until I had children, and I went into early childhood development. And as I was going through that, I happened to hear about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And Carol Nyberg invited me into her atrium because I kept hearing about this Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. We're aware of child development in every subject, but never have I heard about it in terms of their religious education. And so I was like totally hooked as soon as I saw it. It was just like, oh, duh. And so my first course I took was with Carol Nyberg and Tina Lillig. It was their first course they ever offered in the United States, or anywhere, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where it all began. And, you know, it just led from there to taking more courses and working in atriums. And pretty quickly, I was director of religious ed at my church. And then we moved, and I went to another church and was the director there, and have taken all 3 levels of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And it's been my life ever since. I did teach preschool for quite a while using my child development, degree, but the Montessori method just, oh my gosh, blows my mind away. And so I tried to integrate some of that into my classrooms. And we had a multi-age preschool, so I had 3 to 5 year olds. So that was really lovely to have that instead of like just 3 year olds or just 4 year olds. So yeah, and during those times when I was, director in the various parishes, I would write newsletters, monthly newsletters, and trying to convey what this catechesis is all about and how it's different from the traditional kind of Christian formation. So people might have got tired of me doing this all the time, but I loved writing. I still love writing, especially about this. And I got to a point where I had a lot of them, and it just occurred to me one day that maybe I should put them together in a book. And I proposed that to Tina Lillig, and she was like, yeah, that would be great. And they were looking for what their next book would be that they'd, publish. And so this was it. So she was able to read it and review it and put a little piece in it at the beginning of the book before, unfortunately, she died. So that's kind of the story, one thing building on another, and just that movement from small to great, and just keep going on. I did also get a chance to visit Sofia Cavalletti in Italy in 2004.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Tina set that up for me, and I had written a thesis, of course, about catechesis and servant ministry of the adult and stuff. And she was very, very gracious. And if she said it once, she said it a million times that we got to keep our eye on the child. She really didn't want to hear about my thesis about the adult and how it transforms the adult. So that was kind of interesting, but not surprising, I suppose, because it's very easy for us to get kind of fixated on ourselves. And she was very cautious about making sure we didn't get into that mode. It's about the child and what we can learn from them, but really how we can serve them so that they can grow up loving a living God. Yeah.
Well, your book, Taste and See, Savoring the Child's Wisdom, it does a very good job of doing that, of staying focused on the child and what is the child revealing to us? What is the child showing us? And this book, am I correct in saying that this book is the collection of your newsletters and writings that you put together into this book, Taste and See?
Yeah.
Well, I love this book. I've really enjoyed reading it because it is such a great way in small doses, for anybody who has children in their life to just read one chapter and just kind of, like you said, savor it a little bit and help to realize the depth that the children really have, the depth of knowledge, spiritual knowledge that the children have, and that they could feed the adult. I especially like in your introduction, I loved the way you said, the child is the mystery of the conversion of the adult by the child. So the children have this capacity to help adults to be converted, which I think is probably what you were saying with your thesis statement for Sofia Cavalletti that you presented to her. But she was like, the focus is the child. The focus is the depth that the child has.
Right. And the joy that children have, they stay in that first moment of the covenant. And that's something that us adults don't do. We already want to make a response and make a moral judgment, of sorts.
Yes, we have a tendency to make things a lot more complicated and a lot bigger. And the children have this beautiful ability to keep things essential and joyful that we just need to keep remembering. And that is one gift that we have. And I think you talk about it throughout your whole book, that us as catechists, being blessed to be constantly surrounded by a child, or even parents or grandparents or anybody with children in their life, are blessed to be around the children to help us remember to be joyful with God, to be essential with God, and not get so overwhelmed with all of the extras and the details, and
not be so hard on ourselves, really. It is so interesting. Children will just say whatever they say, and then move on, and they're not sitting there dwelling on it. Oh, that was a great thing. That was a cool thought, which, yeah, we would tend to do,
Well, one thing I love that you mentioned that you do is you kept a journal after each
Yes.
of your atrium sessions or any of your encounters with children. So whenever a child had that nugget of pearl wisdom that they gave to you, and like they moved on, they were like, here's this beautiful nugget, and then they move on
Right.
from it, but you took it and wrote it down after each session. I think that that's a really great practice. I think that I want to start doing that.
Yeah, yeah. It is really helpful. I didn't actually do it every single time, but sometimes it was even in the atrium, and of course there's another catechist or two with me, and I'd be like giving them the eye of like, write that down, before we forget it, kind of thing. Yeah, and it takes practice, it takes time. And, I don't know how many pages my book is, barely 100, I think. Oh, not even 100, like 80. That's over like 20 years, so you don't get these gems every session, that's for sure. So just to be patient, it's like trying to watch the kettle boil. It never does, you just, they just come as surprises and as gifts. And then we, they're so rich, we need to savor them. If they came all the time, we'd just be like overwhelmed. But I think, yeah, keeping a journal does help even to see patterns,
Yes. Yeah.
I had one child, oh gosh, way back, who every single atrium session worked with them at nativity. She was probably 4 or 5 at the time, every single time, and a child wouldn't get away with that, in a traditional classroom. And I knew this, but it didn't really click for me that her parents were going through a divorce. And so, of course, the Holy Family was something that she related to because of what was going on in her family. Now, I never heard anything from her, no proclamation, no, even talking to herself or anything, but just the fact that she got that every week after week, she would get that out. And that seemed to be the prayer she needed at that time.
Well, I agree with you that it kind of hones those skills by writing those down each time. It kind of makes you a little bit more aware of what is going on around you. I think when we take the time to write something down, it teaches us to be constantly be looking for it, which is, I think, what happens. Because you took the time to write it down, you then were opening up your eyes to the children's beauty that was constantly surrounding you, so that when they did happen, like what you're saying with the child and the nativity set, your eyes were opened because you were looking for it. You were looking for God speaking through the children, because you were taking the time to write it down and to become aware of it.
Right. And also what writing it down does is makes you aware of who you're not paying attention to. There's always the squirrely verbal ones that draw your attention, but then the quieter ones, they're being quiet, so you leave them alone. But it's good to have a balance. Being aware of what you're not paying attention to is big.
Well, throughout your book, you do a very beautiful job of observing the child, and anyone who has children in their life, especially right now when we have so much focus on the domestic church, as we are not able to come together as community in the atrium, sometimes in masses. So the domestic church is so important always, and right now especially. So as the domestic church and as people who have children in their life, would you speak into the value of observation? Because it's very obvious throughout your book that you take the time to observe the child, what they're saying, what they're doing, and what their needs are.
Right. I think the biggest thing to do as a parent is to just have the prayer time and not try to make it more than it is. Questioning the child too much about, did they get it kind of thing? Questions about, did you see how Jesus did this? Or did you see how, so-and-so respond to that? But to just let the stories be the stories, and just the time together, sitting in a sacred moment with the holy word of God, is enough. That's a really hard thing. It's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to convey too. As parents, we always want to make sure our children are advancing and learning, and that's all good. But when it comes to their religious life, to anybody's religious life, not even the child, I mean, we wouldn't want to be grilled, over what we got out of, say, a homily. If somebody asked us after a service, so what did they say in the homily? Well, who of us can really articulate that,
Right.
But again, it's about being gentle. Right now we're all so anxious, scared, and confused, that to just read the scripture just as it is, and just, not too much fluff around it. And that's basically what we do in the atrium, is just hold it out there.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to first recognize that the child already has this deep relationship with God. So
right.
For us to remember that we're not giving him something that they don't already have. We are just creating a space for the encounters to happen.
Right, right. Yeah.
Like you're saying, it kind of puts us into check of who we are within that relationship. We are not the teacher. We are not the savior. We are sitting next to them. And that if we take on that observation mentality rather than a teacher mentality, we might see that God is speaking to us through the child, through the word.
Right. Yeah.
And how the child kind of encounters the word. I love how in one of your chapters you talked about the beautiful things that the children lift up. You were talking about Jesus was there giggling away in the nativity scene and everything. That's what the children said. That Jesus was just there giggling away, and that we can see the observations of the child and what the child has lifted up after listening to the scripture, and we can take that in as maybe the most important or most essential or part of the doctrine that God is trying to speak to us, because they hone in on that, what is most valuable.
Right. Yeah.
I really loved the way you spoke into that value of the children's observation, and how it really, if we paid attention to what the children were saying, we might actually hear different doctrine than as we are listening with our adult ears.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're amazing. As I looked again at the book, I'm like, oh, I remember, I remember the children who said these things or drew these things. Yeah. What a gift. I just can't hardly believe the gifts I've been given by these kids.
Yeah, I think it just takes an opening up of our minds and our ears and our eyes to be able to see that. And I think it takes a humbling stance as us as the adults in the children's life.
Right.
To allow them to teach us and to be wise to us.
I guess also, it just occurred to me, at home, like in the atrium, we have art materials, and so those can be available for, not always maybe, but after a prayer time, available for coloring or cutting and pasting, or for older children, weaving, or, some sort of handwork. And we can just say, let's just let this seep into us as we draw, or as we crochet or cut and paste, just let it seep in. I think it's then, when children are given that freedom to make whatever response, that's when we get the gems. But again, not always, or we can't see it at the time,
Right.
A lot of it's internal. Silence, we have to keep remembering that silence is a prayer.
Yeah, it takes them having that time space to be able to get into that deeper moment, to be able to encounter God.
Right.
There was one thing that you said in the end of your introduction that I had a question about. You said that you may also consider meditating on a child's drawing or art or reflection on a child's prayer. So as an adult, us meditating on those, can you speak into that a little bit more? What does that look like? What gifts can come from that?
Oh gosh. Well, a lot, because a lot of, well, all the children's art that I've seen is something I would never have expected. And they just combined symbols and different images in a way that we would never imagine. And I'm thinking particularly of, and I'm sure it's in the book, of a picture that a child made of the altar, and then there's two hands coming from above down and this big U shape. And I just couldn't resist. I had to ask him, I'm like, so yeah, tell me what you've got here. And this was a child who had a very hard time settling down. And he said, oh, that's the hands and tongue of God. Oh gosh, I'm going to have to look it up. But what did he write in there? He wrote something in it. Oh, yes. On the tongue is the word yes. So to look at that, it's like, okay, this is the tongue of God saying yes. What is God saying yes to? Is God saying yes to giving his son? Yes to giving us the gift of the Eucharist. Yes to just the whole self-giving nature of God. Yes, I want to be with you. And then, the hands are right there, like reaching down to embrace us. Yeah, to just look and just go, oh my gosh. And then there's the big sun just on the right-hand side, not totally in the picture. That light, God is light, Jesus is the light. I could sit with this one forever, because so often, we don't think as adults that God is saying yes to us. Instead, we have this image of a judgmental God, but the children bring us back to the God that, is saying yes. Yes, I want to be your God. Yes, I want to be with you. Yes, you are precious. Wow. And the colors, now this in the book, of course, is black and white, but the colors are bright colors, that corresponds to that yes. Wow. I've always thought that this one in particular, I would like to put on fabric and embroider, and that's a way to keep meditating on it.
By sitting there and embroidering the child's picture.
Right. Yeah.
That is definitely a way to savor the child's wisdom right there by doing that.
Yeah, and who knows what might come to mind when I would do that.
Right.
So any of the drawings that the children do where they incorporate, images from different places or words that are familiar, but then the children tweak it a little bit. Like the one, I'll never forget this one, where the child took the maxim, love your enemies, and changed it to, your enemies are like the stars in the sky. You should love them. And I really did talk to her parents a couple of times, talk to the child a little bit just to see if, I don't know, studying space in school or talking about enemies or whatever. But no, nothing. And I'm just like, what poetry is that? Your enemies are like the stars in the sky.
Yeah. It's like what you said, the child is like a prophet.
Yes.
Leading us to God, with revealing God's secrets to us.
Yeah. Yeah. God sees the little bit of light that is in our enemies, that there's still a light there. What a thing to dwell on in our time right now with all that's going on. Wow.
Well, I really appreciate that part of your book, or that aspect of your book, that it is a reminder to us the deep wisdom that the child has. They give us these small little pieces of wisdom for us to sit there and chew on for a little bit. And I appreciate in your book that it reminds us as adults who have children in our lives to look for and to respect that deep wisdom that is already there.
Right.
And let them guide us back to God. So I think that your book has a lot to offer us as the adult in a place of observation, but also in a place of humility in front of the child.
Right.
Well, Pam, before we finish today, do you have a story that you would like to share with us about a time with the children in the atrium or that particularly stood out to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have one actually that didn't take place in an atrium, but it was when I was teaching preschool, and it was at a Lutheran church, and I would bring in materials from the atrium. And so I brought in the parable of the Good Shepherd, with all the figures and sheepfold and things, and presented it and things, talked about it and stuff. And at the very end, one of the kids asked me, who made this material? Who made this? And I said, oh, a friend of mine made it. Someone from the parish had made it. And this little boy said, oh, he must be a good man. And I'm just like, wow, they could tell just by looking at how beautiful those materials are. They weren't plastic. It wasn't felt. It was this beautiful wooden sheepfold with all the sheep and the Good Shepherd. And it could tell the character of the person who made it. And I was like, yeah, what we do doesn't have to happen in the atrium. It happens elsewhere as well, wherever we are. And our children, at least the children I'm around, they have way more than they possibly need. And it's so hard to not do that, but to pick and choose, some just really well-crafted things for them to play with and handle and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot, but that one really stands out because it wasn't in the atrium. The children weren't normalized, as we say, but they still knew that this was precious. The materials were precious. I mean, they sat perfectly still, and these were 3 to 5 year olds, for the presentation. And yeah, you don't have to have the perfect environment. When you have the perfect word and you have beautiful materials, and it's presented with dignity.
That's such a beautiful example of how our work with the children or our encounters with the children lead us towards God and lead them towards God is not limited to the atrium space. Well, thank you so much, Pam. Thank you so much for this really beautiful gift of this book, Taste and See, Savoring the Child's Wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your observations of the child's wisdom with all.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing with us today on the podcast. We really appreciate you.
Thanks. I feel honored. It's been a very blessed journey. Just amazing to me. Yeah. And it's so great to have so many other people on the same journey. And
it is. Well, thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you're interested in Pam's book, I have it down in the show notes, a link that you can order it. If you would like to see the picture that Pam talks about that the child drew, it is on page 27 of her book. We're also going to put the picture on our Facebook page, so you can go look on it there so that you can see the beautiful artwork of the child and what Pam was discussing in this episode. Also, don't forget to order your copy of The Good Shepherd and the Child, A Joyful Journey, so that you can join us on our journey through a book study for the next 4 episodes of the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We thank all contributing members to the association. Because of you, this podcast is possible. So thank you so much. If you would like to know more about Catechesis of the Good Shepherd or to become a member, please go to www.cgsusa.org. Thank you for joining us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.